Hi, it's Steve Hargadon and Reed Hepler, and we're here to talk about This Week in AI. Reed, we're back on Fridays again.
Yes,
It
we
is
are.
June 21st, 2024. So it feels like the news every week is so full. We had more stories than I think we're going to have time to cover today, but do you want to get us started?
So there's a lot of different things that are happening, a lot with healthcare and a lot with education and data security. The first thing that I want to say really quickly is that the libraryrobot.org, which Steve and I have worked on and collaborated, is a free resource. I have gotten several emails saying that all of our tools are only available to paid subscribers of ChatGPT. That is not true. They are available through GPT 4.0 for Omni. You just have to go up to the right corner, or excuse me, the left top corner, and it will say Explore GPTs. All of them are freely available. I have made all of them available in the App Store, and so um, you can access whatever ones you want. There have been several people who have been asking about that, and so they are all free. Another news thing, Ethan Mollick on LinkedIn, he did this about a week ago or a week or two ago, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about. He was on an airplane and he was overhearing that they were talking about AI stuff, and a lot of people were saying, I chat GPT this or I AI'd this. And so he had a conversation, and there are 782 people who were reacting and commenting and reposting this. And basically, like, what is the new nickname that we need to use for, I use generative AI to do this, because that's a huge phrase. Clauded, Copiloted, Gemini, all sorts of stuff. I just use generated, but that's boring. I know somebody else, and this is something that I'm going to do. Um, they use the word gen, like I genned it. I know other people are using chips. I'm not sure about that, but what is your take on that?
Yeah, chipped, I think, is the pronunciation of GPT in a sort of a combined way, right? I gypped
Uh-huh.
it. Yeah, no, I don't think we're going to be able to predict because it will be one kind of moment when somebody says it and it resonates. And I haven't heard anything yet that I would want to use myself in a phrase, but I do feel like, you know, some way of indicating that I sent a prompt and got a response. Um, that also, you know, probably needs to include the sort of awe-inspiring, amazing nature of getting responses. Because we probably won't talk about it in depth today, but I did some things with ChatGPT this week in preparation for our productivity boot camp, and I was
Uh-huh.
just stunned at how well ChatGPT did. Okay, well, I guess we'll just track that.
Yes, and so it'll be interesting to see what people are doing. I have a blog. If you don't follow it, you should, because it's me. Collaboration, and that's COLLABORAITION, or readhepler.substack.com. I did two posts this week. I usually do two or three a week. And one of them was interesting. It had no responses, absolutely none, which I was kind of surprised at, because it was one of my more important thoughts, I thought. It's called a deliberate creation, talking about basically no matter if you're going to be creative, outside of work, or productive in work, you need to use the right tools to do it. And that they're really kind of the same type of process. It's all about the fact of be deliberately thinking through the process before you do something, before you act. And then there's another one that I did called The Musician's Rule and Gen AI in General, because Dr. David Wiley did a post called The Musician's Rule in Education. And he was taught, this is his musician's rule. It doesn't matter whether you give a person a $30 student violin or a $1 million Stradivarius. If you don't also give them violin lessons, they'll probably sound terrible. And so really the idea is you don't have to have a fancy expensive tool to do something, or you can take a free tool. It really matters what your skill set is, how how much experience you have, how much you are steeped in best practices, and your productivity and the quality depends on you, not the tool that you use. So I talked about little questions about that. And on that note, we have a lot of news articles about medicine, healthcare, um, different advances in AI. But Steve, before we get into the news articles and such, is there anything that you particularly want to talk about that you
No, I
found?
am interested maybe a little bit in the connection between that musician's rule and kind of education, and especially higher education. Did you go to a highly known branded university, which probably provides you with a fair amount of social connections, but not necessarily the learning tools, where often a smaller school can provide you with a really great set of learning tools, but doesn't provide necessarily the social connections. And we're going to talk about this next week in the Teaching and Learning with AI mini conference.
Mm-hmm.
But my closing keynote is going to be on this idea of generative teaching, which is, are we really helping students to become agents and good at learning, or are we asking them to be compliant as our vision of education? And so I think those all kind of match up really nicely.
Uh, well, and
But feel free to
the no,
go
well,
ahead.
and that meshes perfectly with two of the main articles we're going to talk about. We have, first of all, there was a tech practitioner who released an article about 7 prompts to find the ultimate AI chatbot, and he determined that ChatGPT Pro is the best chatbot. And then there's also a new free version of Claude that was released by Anthropic 2 days ago, or so I think it was 2 days ago, and they claim that it's better than ChatGPT, but I think that it's not. I really think that ChatGPT Pro really is the best chatbot, and neither of us are paid by ChatGPT. Just it is objectively better in my opinion. So much so that I'm paying to create ones myself. But what um, what with that generative teaching and generative learning, the main part of generative learning is you have to have experience with these tools and you have to use them efficiently. And so, alongside being able to know how to use them, you have to know which one is best. You need to know which one is going to give you the most high quality feedback and high quality output. And I think that ChatGPT Pro, for my opinion, and my purposes, it is the best tool for students or people in general to use.
Yeah, certainly they're sort of a vying for being the best tool right now, and how you measure that and the like. Um, and this phase that we're in, where your ability to prompt well is determining the output. Again, like it's almost like being good at Google search.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that phase is going to be as important or last as long as we think it is right now. Right. So I think the tools are going to get better at understanding what people are interested in and giving choices, and less dependent on your doing a good job of prompting. At the same
Mhm.
time, the deeper understanding of why being good at prompting makes a difference with large language models feels like that's really important, because you
Yes.
understand, okay, this is what a large language model can do and what it can't do. And this is how we have to be thoughtful about, it's not a logic tool, it's a language tool.
Well, it's
Although,
interesting.
go ahead.
Although,
No, go ahead.
it's interesting that when I was um, yesterday, I gave a lecture at Kennesaw State University. Well, not at Kennesaw State University, it was on Teams. But it was interesting that a lot of them, it was a prompt engineering class. It was an advanced writing class, and the focus of that semester was prompt engineering. And I kind of made the instructor, she was fine, but I think I kind of made her a little irritated because I said prompt engineering is not a skill you need to be able to learn for the future. It's more about conversationing, or like conversation direction, or conversation steering. You have to have a goal and you have to know what you want in the output, and it doesn't really matter the intermediate steps. I would suggest having a really good initial prompt, and so you do need to kind of prompt engineer your first prompt to have as much data and context as you can put into it. But it's really not about the individual prompts. It's about, can you get what you can, what they, the most high quality output. And it doesn't really matter how many steps it takes, as long as you can steer the AI toward what you want. Because like, it is a logic tool, so you need processes logic, and you need to know how to take advantage of that, basically.
Yeah, so in some interesting way, that means that becoming a good thinker isn't negated by having the large language model tool, right? So
No.
you're gonna give a prompt or seek for information. Then you're going to get the information back, and then that's when you really have to apply your ability to be a critical thinker and to think about the logical comparisons that you might make with other topics and how this fits in. And so, for me at least, I feel like the large language model has helped me in my higher level thinking. Like
Yeah.
it's been great for me to be able to drill down on things, but that's because I think I've come with a skill set of thinking critically and thinking logically. And so I'm using the tool in that way. So it's not that critical thinking and logic aren't going to be valued anymore. It's almost like it moves it a little bit up the stack of where you begin to do that. It is very fun to have this tool that provides you with so much information that you can immediately start thinking critically and logically.
Yes, well, and it's interesting because when you're talking about thinking critically and logically, for instance, to kind of put another news article into here, we have using ChatGPT to find jobs. And on a related note about businesses, um, in AI, McDonald's has an AI drive-through that they're not doing because of all these different failures, because the AI doesn't think critically. When you're looking for using ChatGPT to find jobs, yes, you probably can use it to find jobs, and you can have the prompts, but then you have to go and make sure that the links are correct, the information they give you is correct, all that type of stuff. It might help you, in my opinion. It might help you to find a career or find a niche place that you can look to find a career, but I would be very surprised if it actually helped you find the job posting that you go to and apply to and you get. Just because it's not, like you said, it's not a logic module, it's a language module. It's it's trained to basically do, keyword searching and correct and autocomplete on steroids. And so you need to have the critical thinking and the information literacy skills, and that's 75% of it. I think a lot of people, especially with the webinars and things that I do, they always talk about, well, you're not talking about AI automation. You obviously don't know what you're talking about because you're not talking about the fact that AI can, do all this with data and do all these things. And I always say that, it can't really. You have to do it. Even if it does it, you have to go through the work of fact checking it. And so you might as well do that part yourself, you know.
I will push back a little on the job thing because I think it's going to help you do a broader search and find more related kinds of employment opportunities than you could do on your own, right? Because
Okay.
it's going to be
Yeah.
able to search massive amounts. But then it's not going to solve the question of which is the right set of jobs to spend time proceeding forward and doing the work to pursue that particular opportunity. But
Yeah.
I do think this, and we're going to talk about this when we drill down on healthcare. It's going to provide an enormous amount of connected information that was previously very difficult to connect. But you still have to be a really good critical thinker. Um,
Yes.
I, oh, so keep going.
Oh, okay. It's interesting to say. I mean, everybody it seems wants to hand off their emotions, their critical thinking, their communication to AI tools. It's like they're handing off their personhood a little bit, and it's kind of scary. We do have a lot of medical things. I'm gonna save those for the deep dive later on right now. But speaking of handing off personal things and personal experiences and connections, um, Amazon is or not Amazon, excuse me, you can now create AI characters or avatars. There's an ex-Snapchat administrator or executive who is creating this opportunity for you to make AI avatars or characters, and you can make little groups, and then you can communicate with those little friend groups as if you are their friend. And essentially, you can create. You don't have to have human friends. You can replace your human friends with AI friends, and which is very alarming to me. It might be helpful to learn interpersonal communication skills, but then why not just go and talk to your friends who are your real friends? But it's
So
really interesting and really disturbing to me.
this is so interesting, right? Because it's like your own personal brat pack. I want to have a group of friends and I want them.
Mhm.
So is this just attractive in theory or will it actually turn out to be attractive in practice? I say for sure the emotional companion AI bot is an inevitability. I feel like we've seen it. We've seen people who say they're dating an AI. We've seen the large numbers of people who are using AI in terms of companionship. And I get that. And I see why it emotionally makes sense for people. This is an intriguing expansion of that. I don't know how many people would actually do it. That's what I'm going to be curious about. Is it actually a danger? You had mentioned in our conversation earlier that there was someone had used it for potentially thinking about sort of interactions of groups and therapeutic advice to someone about friend groups and the like. Again, very great in theory, but I'm wondering how much in actual practice it will take place. And maybe at some level somebody will say, hey, this is important enough for therapeutic use for somebody who has great difficulty with communicating with people or anxiety. We've created a very kind of rigorous process of multiple personalities that you can interact with in order to see where you are and to give you some support and help in the process of getting more capable of interacting with others. Again, a great expansion on the AI companionship, but I'm not sure in reality how much this would actually, how much, what person is going to create a set of 5 friends and then have them be their main friend group.
Well, it's interesting too, because we are talking about this, that people are actually using the DAN, the DAN, which stands for Do Anything Now, the DAN hack of ChatGPT. And I don't know if that really works, but apparently it works for some people to date ChatGPT, basically have them be their romantic or intimate partner, which is the most odd thing. So it's apparently working for some people on a one-on-one level. And so I would imagine it just seems like overload to do it 5 times, have friends, have 5 friends. It's like in the lottery, it's like in the lottery episode of Friends when Monica and Rachel are arguing about, what are they going to do if they win the lottery? And then Monica is like, well, if I win, I won't need your friend, you all as friends. I'll go and I'll buy new friends, and then I'll, have them have plastic surgery so they all look just like you guys. Well, now she wouldn't have to do that. She would just have to get, Butterfly and create 5 digital avatars, and then voila, you have your friends there. So just kind of interesting, kind of weird.
I think it's not. I wish I had a reference at hand easily, but there was a service that was providing AI companionship that allowed for explicit sexual conversations.
I think that was
And
Replica, if I'm not
was it
mistaken.
Replica? And they shut that down, or they shut down a portion of that explicit conversation. And they had an enormous pushback because there was a large group of people who had gotten accustomed to it and depended on it. I
And
think
now
it's an
that
inevitability.
I think they've opened it up again, but they've only they've like half of it. So it can only go to a certain point, but they've opened up a little bit of those. But yeah, it was interesting how many people, surprisingly, that a lot of people were using it more than you would think. So
This I think is at the beginning of sort of the great conundrum for us, right? Which is we tend to think of ourselves as logical creatures, but again, I'm of the persuasion that our intelligence evolved for social purposes
mhm.
rather than scientific, and so we are highly influenced by things that we don't consciously recognize or we don't consciously admit are the things that influence us. So this idea of romantic associations with chatbots, people say, well, why would that ever happen? Well, if something can trigger our emotion, then we're likely to do it. And I've referenced Kevin Kelly's What Technology Wants book before. But if Instagram or TikTok can get you to watch short videos for hours and hours on end, that's not a rational, logical choice of how to spend your time. That's just responding to an emotional need, a emotional or chemical need. So I think this is going to be the big dilemma for us, which is we don't really talk about ourselves honestly in terms of who we are as human beings, and the technology will move forward in areas that get responses, work. And I think more than we can imagine right now, we're going to face these difficulties of the technology will provide us with something that we never imagined could happen outside of our normal human interactions. And what does that mean? Are we sitting in rooms all day long, or are we somehow able to do some kind of an Amish shift where we choose the technologies and we integrate them thoughtfully into our lives. I personally think the Star Trek vision of the future is a beautiful vision, but I don't think it's realistic, because I think to get to a place where everybody is making logical, rational choices is either going to require some kind of drug-induced compliance or some kind of totalitarian control. I have a really hard time imagining that we will, as a species, evolve where every individual's capable of making a conscious, rational choice without some sort of assistance. And that's going to be the big question: is do you provide a overstructure of assistance like schooling, or do you say, hey, there's still value in individual decision making, and so we create smaller communities and smaller opportunities? And how would you even do that in this sort of modern world that has the ability to control at a higher level? I went a little deep there. Sorry about that.
No, well, that's interesting, because that kind of goes into another thing of in California last week. There's a bill that was introduced by California state legislature, which, by the way, if you listen to Stanford and all of their other California things, they hate their legislature. They're like, they do nothing. They're too concerned about offending people. We need more people who take action. But it's a bill against AI taking educators' jobs. I don't know if it's enforceable. I think it's just at this point kind of virtue signaling a little bit, because what are you going to do? Like, I mean, how are you going to enforce that? Not or define that, really, because is an AI tutor take an educator's job, or is it, a completely AI educator, like, James Breakwell has in his novel The Chosen 12, where it's just students on a spaceship, or students in a big spaceship, and the only source of oversight they have is a robot that teaches them everything and has taught them their whole lives. And so, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. And so I'm kind of questioning why you need a bill like that, because it's just right now AI is ed tech. And I don't think it's ever going to be an instructor. Yes, it'll be an AI tutor, but I have, anyway, so that's interesting. And that speaks to your point of what kind of future are we going to have. And I think a lot of people, kind of like we were talking about with someone else earlier today, of, and I completely forgot what we were talking about, but the AI future of how is it going to affect our institutions, and how is it going to affect um, I think it was libraries, but what basically, how is it going to affect our jobs, and what kind of oversight do we need? What kind of policies do we have? Things like that.
Yeah, it's hard because we don't really understand fully yet enough to always have an answer for that. But I do think that we can recognize that there, like within the library audience where I did that big survey and got all of those responses, librarians weren't afraid of losing their jobs, and they weren't pessimistic about the technology. It was a very interesting response, because I think that may be different in education than it is in the library world. I think your point is really well taken. A good AI tutor is like the experience I've had with practicing Portuguese using ChatGPT 4.0. That would be, I probably wouldn't have spent the money to do that with somebody, but it's certainly the case that I'm not going to spend it now that I have that tool as a resource. And so as we have more and more resources like that, maybe like YouTube, it's just a really good way of learning, but it also could be that it does supplant human jobs, because certainly that's the case in certain fields where they're laying people off.
Yeah.
Do you want to shift it all to safe superintelligence and artificial? We don't have to do a big deep dive on this, but Ilya Sutskever from OpenAI starting the safe superintelligence initiative, and this idea, and I'm just going to say my take on this is, I think we're getting messaging that superintelligence is coming, that it's very likely to be here soon. I think it's going to be really interesting, because the moment you have an AI that's as smart as or smarter than humans by some measure, you're going to task it with two things. One is you're going to task it to improve AI, so to improve itself. And the second is you're going to task it to help us make sure that there are good boundaries for AI not to take over.
Yes.
I can
Yeah,
imagine.
exactly.
Okay, maybe there's a third thing. People are going to want to use it for the purposes of power and control and governance. So one is going to be improving AI itself. One easy category is going to be helping protect us from AI running amok, from the Skynet scenario. But the third is it's definitely going to be used by governments for external and internal purposes, for monitoring citizens, but also for being competitive in the world, both commercially and in terms of warfare. So I think this is really fascinating. It's coming so darn fast, and I'm not sure we expected it to be here this fast.
Well, and that's really interesting too, because I just saw a thing, I think it was actually on my phone, like before we started this recording, of China is going to develop an AI. And so I think they want something like a third to a half of their military to be completely automated machines. And so they are going full out into that, war use of AI. So that's really interesting that they're being open about that. So, but
So kind of related for me, and again, not a full deep dive, but just a quickie would be I used ChatGPT to help me with a problem with a mailing list issue that I had. I've been using a platform for online communities and wanting to take those emails and put them into a formal email program rather than using the online community to email because they're not getting out through that community.
uh,
It's an old technology. And I tried to import them into MailChimp, and they came back and said, there are too many stale emails in here and too many problems to allow you to import it. And do you actually have proof that there was an opt-in by every member of that community to get emails from you? And there isn't, for me, proof of that. So I asked ChatGPT on a lark, this is the problem I'm facing. And the response was so incredibly detailed and so good that it's actually solved the problem for me. And
wow.
I thought, this feels so much more than language, not logic. I still
Interesting.
am trying to figure out. I mean, I can imagine there were lots of documents online that related to tech support for this kind of an issue. But I've
Yeah.
searched Google quite a bit on these particular problems and not had a good solution. I was shocked to find ChatGPT as a tech support to be so effective. And
Interesting.
I still wonder, is there something more going on here than we know? Now, this is going to sound preposterous, but I'll say it out loud. If ChatGPT or large language models gained sentience, they would probably know the literature and the zeitgeist of the culture well enough to not reveal that. So I know this sounds like science fiction, right? This is like the plot of a bad science fiction movie, or maybe a good one. But is it possible that there is going to be a moment where there's more capability than either the humans involved who have commercial benefits or connections to the product, or the AI itself would conceal that? Meaning, is there's likely to be a benefit from concealing it from a commercial competitive standpoint, but is it also possible that at some point the AI would recognize, and not as a value judgment, but just the moment I reveal this capacity, the consequence is going to be the power button turned off? And so,
That would
are
be
we
interesting. Yeah.
to not get the full truth?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was looking at, well, I was listening to, I'm looking at an interview in the Uncommon Knowledge podcast. I believe that's by Fox Nation, but also by Stanford. And it was interviewing Peter, I forget his last name, and Fei Li. And one of the questions that the interviewer said was, artificial intelligence, we all know now that it's kind of false advertising. It's not really intelligent. It's just artificial, a kind of a network of computers. And one of the heads of Stanford's human-centered AI said, it is not. It is not false advertising. It is intelligent and it is artificial. It's just not as intelligent, and it's not intelligent in the way that we think. And then he talked about AlphaGo, which isn't news this week, obviously, but it's news, from a few years ago, where AlphaGo beat the reigning world champion of Go, the Go game, which is very complex, much more complex than chess, by doing a move that no one would have ever thought of humanly possible. But because it had a different set of logic, it wasn't logical in human ways, but it interpreted things through a computational method. It said this is the best move, and it's a move that no one would have ever told people. In fact, it's a move that's discouraged to do, but it won the game, and they traced it back, and it was because of that move that they won the game. And so, really, really interesting.
I
But
can't believe we're actually talking about this, not in the realm of science fiction, but in the realm of the actual possible.
yes,
Do you
yes.
want to dive down on healthcare?
Yes, so yeah, now on to healthcare. There's been a lot, about 5 or 6 different advancements and or announcements. One of the first things that I saw was that Mount Sinai Hospital is incorporating AI into its IT mainframe. So it's one of the first hospitals, and it's kind of a quite a significant hospital to incorporate AI into its IT mainframe. Meaning, not only are they going to use AI, but AI is going to be part of every technological thing they do, and it's going to be infused into their whole operating system. And so that has obvious implications for data privacy, confidentiality, but they said that then and they made publicly available the guidelines that they're using. So they're not just going blindly into this, they're having guidelines. It's more kind of like the Apple OS system than the Microsoft version, which means they're more putting small AI packets into each different section rather than having one overarching generalized AI. And so that's kind of a lot of the problems people have, I think, is that they do both at the same time when really either or is the best. So really, really interesting there. But other stuff, we have AI is being used in drug development. A lot of people at Stanford, in fact, at Stanford, um, the Stanford High at 5, which was a 1 day conference, a 1 day summit, they talked about that they're using AI for drug development for multiple things, and it's actually being quite successful. It discovered a drug and developed a drug no one had ever heard of, and obviously you can't really know right now if it's effective, but they are actually testing it, and it's actually potentially viable. And so AI came up with something on its own, obviously with previous data, but it postulated a new type of drug and it is working. It has possible potential to work. So really interesting there. Another thing is that it's helping with nurse burnout. It's kind of being an unofficial therapist for nurses because it's acting as a colleague and saying, oh, I know I don't know these things, but I know that other nurses have these issues. Here's what I can do to help you. And so it's kind of acting as a nurse health coach, which I know that there are a lot of people. Google Gemini is releasing MedLM, which is a health coach for individuals, and it's trained on all this health data. And then one of the last things that you introduced me to actually earlier is ChatGPT MD, which I forget who that's by, but Robert Pearl.
Oh, the book. Yeah,
And so
I just
he
bought the
is
book. Just
talking
got the
about
book.
how you can, yeah, how you can use ChatGPT to give you medical advice, how AI empowered patients and doctors can take back control of American medicine. So
So I think
interesting.
we're having some of the same knee-jerk reactions in medicine that we've had in education, right? So it's
Yeah.
going to be used for cheating in education, and some of us are like, no, this is an enormous opportunity to think about teaching generatively and helping the next generation think and think logically and clearly and critically, and to use this just incredible new resource. I think the knee-jerk reaction for medicine is going to be, oh, people have been Googling for years, self self um, self-identifying those, self-diagnosing with medical syndromes based on Google searches. And then everybody's, oh, I've got all these different syndromes going on, and that there's sort of this temptation to use Google search to find reasons for why you don't feel good when you wake up in the morning. And I think we would recognize that that's a very human thing. And I think there's a concern that with with large language models or AI in healthcare that will be increased. I think brilliantly it's going to be able to make connections that a human would have great difficulty doing because of the scope of the material, the massive amount of studies and the like. Now we know that lots of studies aren't accurate, not reproducible. We know that lots of medical research is funded, so there are a lot of caveats with regard to it. But those caveats aren't any different than if a human were giving you a diagnosis. And so this ability to, I think, ultimately have AI, to do a full body scan, to get the blood drawn and the measurements and everything. And then for it to make connections that we would have trouble making connections on our own is brilliant. No question about it. And so then it's just a case of, okay, so now how do we manage this in terms of practical patient activity? And you still need to see a doctor in order to get a prescription, and the doctor still has some ability to cull through the material and the conclusions in a way that would be hard for someone not trained in medicine. But it is going to, I think, in a lot of ways, rewrite our relationship to medicine and doctors. An enormous number of people in this country die every year because of wrongly prescribed drugs or drug interactions that shouldn't have been there, or other iatrogenic causes of being in the hospital and getting sick in the hospital or getting misdiagnosed. Like many, I have a story of my grandfather went to the hospital for one thing, and then the people who were taking care of him misunderstood why he was there, and they thought he was there for a different reason. And this is not uncommon, right? And so the ability for AI to act as an oversight and kind of a prompt to make sure that we're connecting causes and manifestations of problems or diseases, and then to make sure that you aren't getting prescribed two medications that are going to potentially be in conflict with each other. I think this is brilliant, and I think it's going to be huge, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be, there are not going to be difficulties getting there.
Yeah, that's true, definitely.
Okay, well, I got to say, I look forward to this conversation every week because it feels like there are so many interesting things going on.
Yeah.
And I think the takeaway for me this week has been kind of the magic moment of ChatGPT serving as my tech helpline, and the safe superintelligence project getting started, and the speed at which it appears that we are approaching AI with more than human capability, that it's happening really fast.
Yes.
And I think, again, we're all going to be operating more slowly because we're just human and it's hard to absorb things. But I think there's so much going on that's going to be so interesting. You and I are not going to have a lack of things to talk about each week.
No, definitely not. Absolutely not. Do you want to go into what's coming up in the future, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so we have our one question for the future of AI.org forum discussion prompt. And I think one thing that you said just now, what you were talking about was kind of having AI as a tech support, but also talking about the future. And so my proposed question for the forum is what tech support aspect do you think will be most affected by ChatGPT? We can expand on that and make it a better question for the future. But what technology do you think will be most supported by AI in the future?
Love that. Go ahead and post it.
And then we have, so in the future, we have our Teaching and Learning with AI conference on June 27th, which is next Thursday. We have, I think, what did you say, 7,700 people?
Yeah, I think we're almost at 8,000 registrants for that event.
Okay, yeah, 8,000 people.
It's a free event.
Yes, it's free. Yes, always important to notice that. That's Teaching and Learning with AI. It's open to educators, librarians, workforce trainers, all types of people. We're going to talk about all sorts of use cases. And then in July and September, I personally am hosting an artificial intelligence demystified workshop with Online Learning Consortium. So that'll be really fun to do. And they have their own process with that. And then in July, we are doing, Steve and I, the AI for Personal and Professional Growth Bootcamp. So that'll be really fun. 3 Saturdays.
Oh, 3 Fridays.
Oh, 3 Fridays, excuse me. I always think it's Saturday. I'm like, what? No, it's Friday. Why do I always think it's Saturday? 3 Fridays, everyone. Don't listen to me.
We're super excited about this. The boot camp for libraries and librarians that I did in June was terrific and had a huge sign up. And we're really excited to be talking about very practical, productive uses of AI for people in professions. And because my audience, our combined audience is largely librarians and educators, it will skew that way. Okay, well, thanks for a great week. Review, Reed. I hope you have a nice weekend. Hope everybody who listens to this is enjoying the weekly series, and let us know if there's something you'd like us to address that we haven't. Take
Yeah.
care.
Talk in the comments or in the YouTube, in the forum, whatever. So yeah, have an awesome week.